I will begin with starting on the standards for my unit. I did a first grade social studies standard, locating major features on the Earth's surface, locating all continents: North America, South America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Antarctica, and Australia. And I went into that was the first day. And on the second and third days, I also had social studies standard 2, identify and locate the student's city, county, state, nation, and continent on a simple map or globe. Some of the objectives for my unit were correctly labeling each of the continents on a seesaw activity with at least 5 out of 7 correct. On the second day, students should be able to name at least one unique aspect of each continent that helps them remember it, and able to name the continent they live on and point it out on a map. By the last day, the end of the unit, students should be able to identify and label all 7 continents on the map with 100% accuracy, and they should be able to locate the continent and country they live in by pointing at it on the map. The central focus of my unit was the 7 continents. On the first day, they did a brief overview on identifying the 7 continents. The second day, they dove deeper into more specific aspects of each continent. And on the third day, they did a review of the 7 continents. I feel as though my unit was very engaging because I used several different technological tools. On the first day, I used a sing-along video, a screencast where I went over a map of the 7 continents, which was more direct instruction, and I did a seesaw activity. I did a Nearpod, another sing-along video, a Flipgrid assignment, another seesaw activity, a Google Slides collaboration assignment where the students all went in and added to the Google slide, and then I did a Google Forms quiz on the last day. And I also had expanded materials, review game, Kahoot, and flashcards. In order to progress my students' prior knowledge, they started off only knowing knowledge of maps, and we had done small conversations on the names of the continents, but it was very basic. So to start the unit off on Monday, I did a song that went over all the continents and a screencast where it went over this map, and I went over and talked about each different continent and gave a little brief overview on where each one was located. And then they had a seesaw activity where they had to take the labels and put them over the correct continent. So this first day was very basic, just labeling and identifying the continent. On the second day, I went into a progression to deepen understanding of students' knowledge and more details about each continent. So they had to know. So I did a Nearpod interactive PowerPoint where I was talking on each slide so they could read the PowerPoint and hear me talking, where we went over some animals and countries and places to live on each continent. I feel as though this deepened their understanding because it made them think of each continent as an actual place to visit instead of just a spot on a map. I feel like this would deepen their conceptual knowledge of continents rather than just having them look at a map and having to identify it. And then they did a Flipgrid assignment where the students had to choose a continent they would want to visit, and tell me why they would want to go there and what makes it different from the other continents. And it was a short 3-minute response. I told them to brainstorm for at least 2 minutes before responding and then give a nice response on which place they would like to visit. And knowing my students' interests, I know they're really creative and they love to make up fun stories like this. So I thought it would be a great way to end kind of this day, letting them have their own little creative journey through the continents. I also know that my students really enjoy music, so each day I tried to start off with kind of a sing along song they can do and a fun video. And this second day on Wednesday, for the Flipgrid assignment, I do have differentiation for a student who has a speech impairment. So I let him submit a Google document form where he could draw a picture of where he would want to visit and write a few words about it, and then upload the image of it onto a Google document and submit it. So that was my one of my forms of differentiation I did. And on the fourth day, it was more of like a review type day before we did the quiz. And I wanted students to collaborate, which is why I did the Google slides. And I wanted them to learn from each other and get insight on what some of the others' ideas. So maybe they could say, oh, that's a really good way to think about that continent, and help them on the quiz, which is the last thing that they would do, the Google Forms quiz. And ways I had a positive learning environment. I supported collaboration, creativity. I had some of the games I know my students really like from their interests in other activities that we've done in class. I did a Kahoot game with about 10 questions on it to study for the quiz. I did Quizlet flashcards, which also have some games in there they could do. And I did a review world continents where it said the name of the continent and they had to click on it. And I had I can statements, so students had a goal for each day. And to monitor my students' progress, I had some form of formal or informal assessment each day by having the seesaw activity, which I can check their progress before moving on to the next day. I had the Nearpod, which includes questions between each slide, where I could go back and look at the answers to their questions and see how they did. The Flipgrid assignment, to know that they're learning more conceptual knowledge about each continent. And then the seesaw activity on day 2 was another labeling, kind of like the one on the first day. And that could give me a good idea on how much they progressed throughout the week. And the quiz was the formal assessment at the end of the week, which would give me a good idea whether we still need to review some things about the continent or whether we can move on to the next unit, which would be ocean